So today, when you integrate testing and you use open source tools such as JMeter, you have several problems. Okay, just by raise of hand, how many people have used JMeter in their past? Good, good, good. How many people know about JMeter? How many people do not know about JMeter? Okay, so I'll also kind of, for the sake of the people that do not know JMeter, don't have experience, I'll spend some time, a few minutes around JMeter. But in general, the first problem is version control friendliness or incremental testing, the ability to adjust the scripts or the tests from commit to commit. This is currently tough to accomplish with JMeter. Especially if you want to distribute testing, meaning in the past there was a QA team, right, that was responsible for testing, but today more and more developers gaining the responsibility of testing, and there can be hundreds of different developers in a single organization, each building scripts, changing them from commit to commit. The ability to trace these changes is science fiction at this point. And this is one of the challenges that we are trying to solve. And not only to trace all of the changes, but also to be able to combine all of the tests coming from many different developers into a single test. Right? Today, when a DevOps runs Jenkins and want to run some tests, usually the test will be performed one after the other. And every test requires a certain investment to understand the test, maybe build the test, and then if something breaks, to analyze the results and know where it broke. So this is a thing of the past, okay? With Taurus, you distribute the responsibility of testing. So many developers build tests, and they can build it in any open source tool they like. They can build the test without even opening any open source tool by using YAML or JSON or a few other languages that we support. And whatever the various developers choose to use, everything when just before the build get extracted, compiled into a single test that can include hundreds of different tests running in parallel. While this single test runs and ends in, let's say, in 5 minutes from now, you get either pass or fail criteria. So the ability to version control, to track the changes, and to combine many tests into one and run everything in few minutes, that's what the benefit, the few benefits that Taurus provide. Good. As mentioned, Taurus is an open source. It's a Python-based software anyone can use. Either go to BlazeMeter Taurus or do a pip install BZT. It's a one line that installs everything. Now, the minute you've installed this in your Jenkins server, okay, you don't need to actually install JMeter or Gatling or the grinder, and soon to be added Selenium as well. Because once we realized that one of your developers created a script with Gatling, for example, Gatling will get downloaded and installed. If it's JMeter, JMeter will get downloaded and installed. You ask why? This is a one-line install that basically installs all of the tools that are required to actually run the various tests. So if you're doing, for example, on a commit, you build a Docker, where in the Docker you build the application and the performance lab as well. This can be very useful because in the one line, you build the performance lab, you get the scripts, you run the scripts, you get the results, and the Docker goes away. And you can do it on every commit, okay? Okay, so I said I'm gonna touch 2 minutes on JMeter. JMeter is an Apache project. It's the most popular tool today to test backends. It's not necessarily load testing. It can be also API testing and functional testing of the backend, regression, soak, anything you want to test backend. because you can build, first it supports any protocol, you can build any sort of scenario, and it doesn't need to be a static scenario, it can be an if, then, else scenario with third party kind of, let's say I want to extract properties from a database or whatever I want to achieve, I can actually do with JMeter. However, JMeter is a UI, meaning if you're a Java genius, you can also write using code, but 95% of the use cases, people using JMeter, they use this UI, okay, which I'm certain many of you are familiar with. And you can, like, if you master JMeter, it takes you 2 hours to do that. You can build almost anything you want in it. But again, this is excellent for what we call on-demand testing, when you want to create a script and run it, okay? And kind of this compares in some ways to load runner of HP Mercury. So this is JMeter. And behind JMeter, whatever you do in this UI, you get an XML file, which is the JMX of JMeter. The XML file is not version control friendly. To do 2 transactions, I'll have 500 lines file, which from change to change, it's very difficult to track. This is one of the challenges we solve on top of JMeter. Okay, so this is basically how the XML looks like. And now we go into Taurus. So in Taurus, basically the underlying assumption that within the organization you're using several tools already. And there is kind of a democracy of tools. One is using JMeter, the other is using Selenium, and another one is using Gatling, so on and so forth. We've added an abstraction layer on top of all of these tools. So basically, you can specify, let's take, for example, YAML. You know, on the right, here is an example of the YAML. I can specify what I want to have tested without opening one of the tools. I can also say, this is the configuration file, please use JMeter to actually run it. Or maybe I want to use something else because, I don't know, because I want to use Selenium, because I want to automate a real browser, or I want to use JMeter because I want to run load, a synthetic load, and JMeter scales as opposed to other tools. So this is an example of a YAML, but you have the ability to edit a YAML because it's human-friendly. You can read and write, but you can also do it in JSON because you can use code to actually generate JSON structures, and they are equivalent. You can do JSON or YAML or a combination of both, or you can record. Okay, so you can record a web application or a mobile application and get, again, either a JMX or a YAML or a JSON, whatever you feel more comfortable with. This is the way to start. Okay, at the end of the day, now this is especially good if you're doing microservices. Like if you have many, many files, each certain configuration file takes care of testing either a microservice or, again, it belongs to a certain developer that has a library of these files. Let's say you have hundreds of these files, all of them get compiled into a single file before it runs, and usually it will be a JMeter test behind the scene. To run it, so let's say I'm doing the simple stuff, only one YAML file, BZT, and the actual script runs it. And it looks something like this. This is a very short video, and hopefully I'll also be able to show you a live demo. This basically runs on my laptop, okay? So I can actually build a script, debug it, run it on my laptop. This can also be done on a Jenkins server, right? So if I'm creating a Jenkins build and I'm extracting all of the files from GitHub, all of the YAML file, JSON file, JMX file, whatever, okay, into a single folder, and then I tell Taurus, run them all, again, in 30 seconds, all of the files get compiled into one, and this one file runs. It doesn't have to have this GUI, right? If it's Jenkins, it will not have any GUI at all, But if I'm debugging, this is the kind of GUI I will see. Now let's see what the language supports. Again, this is a complicated YAML. It has like 40 lines, but it represents a JMX of 1,000 lines. It can be a one line, like test, here is the URL for the test, and that's it. That's the entire file of it. Okay, but this, let's see what we have here. This is a scenario where we have a CSV data source, a global header, everything is text. And then I have a simple, it can be even more simple. It can simply say slash, meaning go to the home page. But in this case, I have the URL and the label, right, of a transaction. This is a more complicated transaction. You can see just in the center of it, two variables that are taken from the CSV file. Okay, all of these, anyone that knows JMeter immediately recognize where are these coming from, because all of the functionality that JMeter possesses is available using YAML and the JSON structure. This is, of course, so again, variables. This is how it looks like in GitHub, because it's text. Suddenly, your scripts become version control friendly, and you can actually track all of these changes, go back, merge, all the nice thing we do with version control. This is the same exact file in GitHub. So again, comparing a JMeter test, and these are the same. This is basically, I don't have the example here, but it's the same. Okay, this is how it looks in JMeter with the GUI. This is how it looks with the YAML. When you compare it to the JMeter file, the JMX file, it's 500 lines versus 40 lines of readable YAML. Okay, so we talked about you can open a YAML editor. It's very good for presentations because YAML is human readable, but the same language is also available using JSON, right? And it's absolutely the same. And actually, Taurus also helps you by converting YAML to JSON, JSON to YAML. So for example, if you have a test, let's say you even recorded the test, and you get an initial YAML file, but you want to move it into JSON because you actually put it in your code and have your code generated JSON, we provide you with conversions between YAML and JSON and JMX. Okay, so consider that again, and JSON is even shorter than YAML, although in this PowerPoint it looks differently. But again, you see exactly the same file converted. Okay, so let's say we have a tool. Either we get scripts from developers, like already I'm getting a JMeter as is, like a black box, or I'm creating a YAML or getting a YAML from another developer. You know, who knows? Who knows if it works, if it doesn't work, if it works as expected. So you get the ability to debug your script very easily. As I mentioned, at the end of the day, everything gets compiled, and in many occasions it will be a JMeter script behind the scene, and you add a property minus GUI, and you have the ability to debug the script. JMeter opens up. You run it in the same way I presented earlier, where you saw all these terminal graphs. But when you do the minus GUI, JMeter itself opens. And you see the script that was just recently compiled, and you can actually run it and see each and every transaction if this is what you expected to have or not. Okay? So this is one way to debug. And even if at the end of the day, Taurus determines that you need 5 different engines, because it can happen, like you have 100 of different scripts and it needs to run 5 different engines, it will open 5 different engines. You can debug each and every one of these. By the way, another way to use Taurus is to simply compile a JMeter test without actually building it. Right? You simply specify it or record it, and have Taurus build, using a lot of best practices, build a script for you that you can then leverage. So this is one aspect of it. The other aspect is reporting. So, you know, for those of you who like, where was it? This kind of report, that's nice. It gives you kind of all of the high-level statistics immediately at your console, but sometimes it's not enough. So you do the minus report, okay, and you get more comprehensive results. And again, everything is part of the same project. So here, for example, this is a Jenkins job that runs all the time. And you start by seeing the trends of each and every KPI, like what happened this run, previous run, etc. All of the points are clickable. Once you press on any point, you get the results. So these are comprehensive results that you can actually go in and see, okay, what was the performance of a certain transaction, and maybe compare different transactions and see kind of, I don't know, what went wrong, etc. And you get this each and every run alongside to having all of the artifacts of a test. Artifacts can be, first, what was the initial configuration file, what was the JMX that was compiled and then used, all of the logs associated with the specific run. So you get all of the artifacts as well as the reports available to you at all times, and you can repeat a test, especially when something gets broken, it's very important, and you can compare between runs and tests. It can be runs of the same test or different runs of different tests. Okay? Good. So far I talked about I'm building configuration files, many, right, to support an organization of many developers or an application with many microservices. And you know, I have a language, I can build the configuration files, I can compile all these configuration files into a single one, run it. But then I can also get an existing JMeter test. And when I say JMeter, we also support Gatling and the grinder, and soon adding Selenium as well. When we get a test, it's a black box, because when you get a script, you don't want to go in it. It's kind of too tough to understand what someone else wrote. But what you can do is first reference that test, and then you can override various elements within the test. You can basically override everything. From the outside, from the configuration file written in YAML or JSON, I can say, as in this case, use tests jmx dummy.jmx. For two variables, set the value and disable an element, or maybe also enable an element. So as long as you know the name of the element, you can override it and its properties. This is the way we use kind of black box existing script. So if I'm the DevOps, I'm getting 3-4 YAMLs, 2 JMeter files, and I can obviously add a few of my own, and I can also alter from outside the black box scripts I'm getting. Okay? So this is using existing tests by overriding them, and again, the configuration file that basically addresses the file I got is also in version control, and I'm able to change it and do whatever I want with it. Thresholds. So at the end of the day, when we run a test basically has, I would say, two aspects to it. One is let's simulate accurately as possible what we want to test, whether it's kind of 100 users using a mobile application and in parallel 200 users using the website, etc., etc. Then I define a list of smaller test thresholds, which I'm sure most of you, especially if you're dealing with continuous integration, you know about. We provide the ability to, regardless of the scenarios, in a different configuration file, specify the list of thresholds you want each test to take into consideration, right? So again, I'm the DevOps. I'm getting 50 different scripts, but I want to define the thresholds, okay? So I'm adding a file, and there is a very easy language. For example, average response time of a transaction named purchase greater than 400 milliseconds for over 30 seconds. Continue the test, don't fail the test, but mark the test as fail. In the same way, I can say stop as fail. So I don't want to waste any time. If a threshold is broken and that means that the build is broken, let's stop the test. No need to wait on it. Okay? And obviously, all of the performance KPIs are included in these languages, in this language, as well as if I want to build assertions. Okay, so this goes back to a more functional level. I have an API call, I have a response. I can actually build an assertion that says, does this response equals or similar to what I expect for this response to be? And then if yes or no, again, this can be a threshold. Like if 50% of the responses are good, maybe good, continue. If not, then this is a problem, and either stop the test or mark it as fail. Needless to say that Taurus talks back to Jenkins, so a JUnit XML file is generated each and every test. So you can use it and to integrate with your existing Jenkins reports and understand fail, success criteria. Okay, and the one thing, at least for me, everyone will find something else, but at least for me, the one thing I like about Taurus the most, the fact that in a single command, this is a single command line, I can run as many tests as I want, and they will compile together, because the time to test is important. If we run sequentially one test after the other, and we need to analyze each, it means that the time to release gets longer. If we're able to run all of these in parallel, as if it was a single test with a single set of results, then I know that in 10 minutes, I will have run all of my tests and know if the build is okay or not. So I'm getting a more predictable time to release. Again, this is yet another example. When I run and simply everything within a folder, run it. I'm going to show a short demo in a second or two. And then, as mentioned, a JUnit XML gets created, and I'm sure most of you identify at least the left side, which is Jenkins. And every time a build runs, you also get a set of results at BlazeMeter, meaning with the web UI. So let's say I know a build is running 2 a.m. I can always go back to my account in BlazeMeter and see the test running. And if I get a message, you broke the build, whatever, I can go in, see what was the problem from home, try to fix it. Maybe it's an environment variable, maybe it's a bug. Okay, but whatever it is, I'm able to test immediately and affect, whether the next test will run successfully or not. Okay, so before showing kind of a live demo, and allowing some room for Q&A, let's see what we've achieved using Taurus. First, the version control issue. It becomes a non-issue. The minute it's a language that anyone can read and write, you can incrementally build test scripts. You can leverage existing scripts and modify them as a black box. You don't need to actually go in, and you can keep the configuration file on the side. So even when you get new versions of the script, still the configuration file you have on the side will affect the black box script. And the ability to simultaneously run numerous tests coming from developers or simple many microservices tests and communicate results back into Jenkins. Good. So this is kind of the PowerPoint deck. And before showing you, I would spend 4 minutes to show you live demo. Allow me to ask if you have any question or thing you want me to double click.
Oh, sorry. Just kind of curious, why was Taurus written in Python if you're using Java to do all this stuff?
So good question. Java is related to JMeter, and it's by chats. So the idea is to become tool agnostic and help you become tool agnostic. It's kind of why Java and not Ruby. For me, these are the two questions.
Is your plugin compatible with the new workflow plugin within Jenkins?
So we have plugins for Jenkins, Code Pipeline, TeamCity, Bamboo, and many others. So yes, the answer is yes. And that said, and many of us love the plugin. What I usually love is to use the command line argument. It's a one line you put in a shell script, and it works. And it gives you the freedom to do whatever you want with it. But yes, we have plugins for kind of every, and what we don't have yet, we'll probably create.
So how tight is Taurus with JMeter? An example is JMeter come up with a new version with new parameters. How fast are you updating Taurus to those new properties?
Very good question. That also relates to different version of other tools. So the idea is to support any version the minute it goes out. You can also specify, you don't necessarily need to use the latest version. So for example, one of the, it can also be, one of your, let's say you're using an outsource service that you're using JMeter 2.11 and yourself you're using 2.13 or something like that. In the configuration file, you can actually say which version, and also JMeter plugins. They also has various versions. So this is all kind of taken care of. Okay, what I'll do now, I'll simply, hopefully I have internet connectivity, I'll show you a live demo, and then allow room for additional last questions. So again, this is, you saw the pictures, it's not necessarily different, but this is the major YAML file. Also, here is where I'm referencing an external file. The thresholds. And this is actually also very interesting. I'm specifying 2 execution threads, right? Each execution clause is an engine by itself. It can be as many as I want. And let's say if I were to have 10 different execution clauses, I would have 10 different engines running in parallel. Okay. And let's say that's enough for now. So what I'll do is simply run it. Okay, this is a live thing, and hopefully, if I have internet connectivity and everything, it will work perfectly. You see on the top, it identified 4 different files they have compiled. You actually have a link to the cloud report. In 2 seconds, you'll see the Taurus console. As mentioned, you have all of the top-level KPIs in front of you. And again, this is for debugging, and also if you want to run, it's perfectly capable to run many tests. You see 2 engines running now, the 2 execution clauses, currently at 0% progress because I think it's set to run indefinitely. You already see an alert that one of the threshold is about to be met. There's a window, I think, of 30 seconds that currently it's 10 seconds. If the window will be reached, then the alert will turn red. And if, depending on the configuration, it can also break the build or simply mark it as failed. In parallel to this, when I go to my account, you can see that one test has like a stop button. It's also green. It means that it's actually running. Now, the test is running on my laptop. Okay? The results are in the web UI. So obviously I have, again, this is the test I'm running now on my laptop. And if I go to the actual source, I can see that the test is currently running, but I also see all of the runs of the same test. Okay, so this is running Taurus from my console. If we look at Jenkins, so again, to run the same test, it will be tough to run from the same computer, but okay, I'm not logged in. Let's see. Okay, here is an example that the same test builds running, connecting to all of the variety of plugins I'm using on my Jenkins. And when I'll press something, I'll probably get all of the thresholds that were met. So at the end of the day, Jenkins will run it. A JUnit XML will get generated. If I'm using various plugins, I will continue seeing all of the reports that I'm used to seeing. And in parallel, as mentioned, I'll get everything in my web account. I'm sorry?
Could you demonstrate on Jenkins how the configuration of that works?
Yeah. So I'm going to show the configuration. I'll simply need to log in. Okay, we have two possibilities for configuration. One is using a plugin. The other is using a shell script. This is using Taurus without a plugin. So as you can see, the Java version is just for debug purposes. I'm simply running BZT on everything YAML, and that's it. And telling to disable the console because in Jenkins I don't want to see the colorful GUI. And when a JUnit XML is being generated, I'm simply changing the name of it. And if we look at the output of one of the latest runs, let's take that one. Let's see what we see here. So this is Jenkins. I think up to the level of, here is where Taurus starts to run. And again, you have the link until it ends. When it ends, other plugins, Jenkins plugins, kick in. So this is one level of configuration, the easiest possible. Another level of configuration, hold hopefully this is it. Oh, 1 second, trying to find a plugin. Let's see, plugin demo. Okay. This is a plugin where you basically are able to select one of the many tests you've created in the GUI. I don't think I presented the BlazeMeter GUI here, the commercial one, but let's say you're using the commercial one. You've defined one of the many tests and you simply choose it here. And actually that's it. Nothing more to it. Okay. Here you get another link to the report, meaning you can, from the build, you can actually go to the report, but it's basically the same.
You mentioned that it had the ability to integrate with kind of a variety of different tools. Does it integrate well with TestNG or any of those others?
Good question in terms of integration. So it's always a challenge because you want to run tests, but you also want to be able to identify problems, fix fast. So the first level of integrations include New Relic, Dynatrace, AppDynamics, and CloudWatch. Okay, so you can easily configure your account in each and every vendor, and you'll get an overlay of data, test, and APM. Second level of integration is Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, Travis, and all this stuff. So this is currently the integrations we support. Good. Yeah.
So we work for a financial company, and most of the clients that we have are like banks, and unfortunately, most of them are using IE browsers, which makes our life harder because most of the test cases, like the Jenkins, even all JMeter test cases are heavily Firefox and other browser-centric. And even our Jenkins box is on a Linux box. And we do not want to go with an option of Windows slave. And how can we address this issue? Like, I've looked at Sauce Labs, but that was kind of, we had to go through the proxy, which we're not sure about it. So can you help us?
Yes, so the question about Microsoft. The quick answer is the Taurus runs on Microsoft. This was a result of many companies that still have a lot of Windows servers. So again, Taurus, and you can read a lot of the discussions in the news groups, fully support running off a window box. Any additional questions?
In order to build up enough load on our server backend, we're running JMeter multiple times. Does Taurus facilitate coordination of that?
Yes, of course. First, if you want to run a distributed load, Taurus facilitates that. But again, it's not like I'm trying to push anything, but we have a commercial offering that resides on-prem and is able to synchronize many resources, up to several hundreds, to create load and get all the nice graphs and everything. And Taurus does a portion of that as well, the open source version. Last couple of questions, if any. Good, good. So kind of to conclude everything, and BlazeMeter has a booth outside, so feel free to come by and ask questions and kind of have dialogue and share your experience. But the idea is that continuous integration is new. Testing as part of continuous integration is a bit challenging, and we try to make it easier. We'd love your feedback if you think there are other use cases that can be relevant, and as said, we'll be very happy to continue the dialogue. Thank you very much.